Desperate to flee Taliban rule, Afghans are resorting to this, grasping at U.S. military aircraft and risking their lives. Some hung onto the wheels and fell to their death. Those left behind could only watch in horror. The chaos at Kabul's airport a sign of the distress over what's ahead. With Afghanistan's land borders under Taliban control, thousands crowded onto the tarmac. No visible security or any semblance of order. We're here because we're jobless, this man says. We left our homes. We have no food. They scaled the walls around the airport and jumped over barbed wire. Satellite images showed the size of the crowd outside just waiting and the traffic gridlock. So many rushed to the airport to find only disappointment and frustration.
It's very, very bad situation and people is in chaos.
Western nations, including Canada, scrambled to organize evacuations as British citizens and embassy staff were among the lucky few getting out. U.S. forces used helicopters to clear the runway, with Afghans recording what they saw.
The helicopter is flying very down on the ground, trying to scatter people, to scare and scatter people.
The Americans temporarily shut down all flights in an effort to regain control. They struggled, though. With 6,000 American troops being sent to the airport, they opened fire and killed some they considered threats.
A general should have understood what it meant to leave an evacuation point in the heart of the largest city in Afghanistan. This wasn't a decision, this was a mistake.
Just outside the airport, here's what the people are fleeing. Taliban militants back in control and showing it with firepower. Most Afghans can't leave, facing an uncertain future their country now can't escape. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
When the only constant in life is change, you need to be ready. This is the Man-Made Survival Show.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Jose Prado of ManMadeSurvival. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel and watching this video. I really do appreciate it because today's video is going to be, I would believe, a pretty important video because of the perspectives that I'm going to be giving to you. Because I quite frankly have not heard anything like this that I'm going to be showing you in an alternative media or, prepper forums or anything like that. And especially not in the mainstream media. So I really do think that the perspectives I'm going to be bringing here today are going to be pretty important for you to consider. But before I get into the podcast, I do have several announcements that I need to make. First off is that the podcast is going to be audio only for a while because, there's just several things that are going on here at home with kids going back to school, making time for homework, being at work. It has gotten busy, so there's overtime that I have to take care of. My dad just recently came back from the hospital. It's just another thing that's going on. It's just several things are going on all at once. So in order for me to be able to do the podcast, I need to cut down on the editing time. So that is the reason why it's going to be audio only. So I would really appreciate your prayers and your support, during this time. Also, I want to mention the book. The book is almost done. We're in the final stages of editing. And once we're done with the editing, then we're going to be sending it to get it printed. And also gotta hire somebody to do the audio version of the book. But all of that is coming together. Hopefully by the end of September at the latest, I will have printed copies and an audio book to be able to offer you for your purchase, for you to support this work that we're doing. And I really do appreciate it if you did buy a book. And once you read the book, if you think it's gonna be beneficial for you or somebody else that you know, once you're done with it, I would appreciate it if you pass it along so they can also get prepared. If you can send them to the website and get them to buy, that would be great also. But even if just one copy gets, passed around, that's even better. Because I really do believe that right now we're living in a time where preparedness can no longer be a hobby. And we actually have to, be more hands-on and be prepared for the things that are going on. Because as this entire COVID-19 craziness is getting to a scale that we have never seen in the West, or we have never seen in parts of the world that we thought that were free. Okay, so I really do believe that's the reason why we have to look at all of this now and really take the proper steps to prepare to make sure that our families are taken care of. All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this podcast, because I really do think that the perspective that I'm going to be bringing you, it's extremely important for preparedness. All right, because the first thing that we have to really look at when we are seeing all these things going on around the world, which of course are plenty. You know, the laundry list of things going on are extremely long. The first thing that we have seen lately is the thing in Afghanistan, right? The whole debacle with the U.S. government pulling out and the country pretty much falling into chaos very, very quickly. Another thing we have seen is the lockdowns in Australia, and how, you know, the people are trying to fight it off by protesting and stuff, but the police are becoming very tyrannical too. You know, they have bowed pretty much to become, I guess, you would say, a lot more ruthless in order for people to just go back home and just obey the government. And of course, one of the things that I've shown you here and that I've told you here is that yes, you know, we do need the police. The police are very important, but we also have to understand that they have a job to do and they're gonna do it. And you know, maybe the blue line is thin. You know, one of the things that is very famous in the United States, but a blue shirt from a brown shirt, that line is even thinner. Okay, it's probably as thin as the fabric that those shirts are made out of. And the police in Australia have actually shown that to be the case. Now here in the United States, I guess we're gonna see in the future if those measures become just as extreme. But anyways, other things that are going on around the world is that, you know, we had floods in Tennessee. Now the hurricane is going up in New Orleans. You know, there's fires, there's shortages of food. Farmers cannot grow any food. You know, the shortages are getting to a point where even Kamala Harris told people, I think it was the UK or some other place, where they told them that they should go ahead and buy their kids' Christmas stuff because, you know, there might be shortages in the future. You know, there's just a bunch of different things that are going on. All right. And the first thing that we have to really look at this is, are we mentally prepared for us to be able to go through all of this? Okay, because yes, preparedness will set us in the proper direction for us to be able to withstand whatever happens. Maybe all of those things at once, right? Because it's not just one thing happening. We can have COVID-19 going rampant with new variants, whether you believe it's a bioweapon or not. We can have the government becoming very tyrannical, while at the same time we have shortages of food and water and other things, which will create even more tyranny in government bodies. You know, other things like wildfires and floods and hailstorms, where the hail is the size, you know, of a softball or something like that is coming down and destroying houses and cars and different other property and stuff like that. You know, that would really destroy crops and destroy fruit trees and other stuff that would really be in its path, would be devastated if it got hit by those. So the point is that there could be a lot of things going on all at once, and all of that is going to affect very many people mentally. So what today's podcast is going to be about is about mental health. Okay, I'm not a therapist or anything like that, but I do want to talk about the things that I do believe, as not only as the host of ManMadeSurvival, but also as a private citizen. You know, I have my own thoughts. Those things I share with you here each and every day, or, you know, every time I do a podcast. And I really do think that we have to look at our environment and into the future, because, you know, the United States is a place where there's a lot of mental health issues, and I really do think that in some cases people take advantage of those things, right? I'm not saying that everybody does, and I do admit and I do see that there are actual mental health issues in society that people need to take care of individually, but there's also, you know, like anything else, people abuse the fact that there is mental health, so, you know, try to get away with things. But when you looking at it in your own alliance, in your own perspective, in your own life, with the people around you that you know, you really have to look at that and see who in your alliance, in your family, in your friendships and everything are the ones who would be the weakest in their mind. If crap really did hit the fan in the United States, all right, the way that it did in Afghanistan, the way how people are freaking out in Afghanistan because the Taliban is coming in. How many of the people in your own family, in your own life, would do something that would be very, very terrible, like take their own life, hurt themselves, try to flee or trying to do things that are not coherent. Those are the things that we have to look at right now and really help those people if we have them in our family and put them in the right path so they can get things under control, right? So here's the thing. In the future, if crap really does hit the fan, they're not going to be any therapists because they're going to be taking care of their own families, right? They're going to be taking care of their own issues. They might not even be pharmaceuticals for people who need antidepressants and other type of medicine, okay? And that might put them over the edge, all right? So those are the kind of things that people need to really work on right now and wonder what is going to be their alternative in order for them to be able to function in society the way that it's going to be later on, okay? Because we know that during the lockdowns in 2020, suicide rates went up, and that's very unfortunate. But, as mild as I would say 2020 was, especially in some places more than others, just the slightest, I guess you can say, the slightest inconveniences could really push people over the edge. All right, so if you suffer from mental health, right, you really need to look at things that you can do when your therapist is not there, when you don't have your medicines. If you rely on marijuana or anything like that, then what are you going to do once that is not available? If you really have alcohol in your life so it can take the edge off, what are you going to do to pretty much not be dependent on those systems? And that's exactly what I'm trying to get at here. All right. So the first headline that I have for you is about soldiers or suicide rate in soldiers. Now, it's really hard and very difficult, or it's very difficult to find some type of a statistic that is accurate on how many soldiers commit suicide. And I try to look for it in other countries and stuff like that, and it looks like they keep that on the wraps. They don't want other countries to know how high the suicide rate among soldiers is. And the reason that I was interested in that is because those are the type of people who practice, who are actually, being a soldier is their job, that they have actually trained and seen things that the average citizen, we have not, right? We have not seen people being blown up. We have not seen gunshot wounds to the extent that you would see in a war. We have not seen, or we have not been under pressure for artillery fire or anything like that. So if soldiers going through that training, seeing those things, living that life, they have high suicide rates, how much more is it going to be in the population that have never seen it and then suddenly sprung upon them? All right, so one of the things that I've seen, that I've listened to and I've seen about Afghanistan is that, there's people from newborns to age 25. They have not really been under the Taliban rule. Okay, and now that the U.S. government is leaving, people are freaking out. They have never been under that type of rule. They actually tasted Western freedom, and they don't want it to end. So, of course, everybody's piling into the airport and they're trying to leave. We all saw the videos of people trying to get on the airplanes, and, as the airplanes took off, several people, 2 people fell off at 40,000 feet, of course, to their death, and 1 other person was found in the landing gear. Now, that's desperation. That's a type of desperation that I don't want to see here in the United States because people are unprepared. All right, the population of Afghanistan is 38 million people, and of course, some people do agree with the Taliban, and they have pretty much blended in perfectly. Nobody really has been, or not. I wouldn't say nobody. Those people who have blended in perfectly, they don't have anything to worry about because it's just part of the system. But then there's others who work for the United States Army, who work as, interpreters and other stuff. Those are the ones being hunted down. The American citizens that live there are being hunted down. And, there's also the women who are trying to very desperately flee because they understand what's waiting for them once the Taliban establishes full control. Right? So those are the type of things that we have to look at, because that is the actual data that we're seeing up to date on how things would turn out if we do not prepare for a future invasion of the United States. We have a big possibility that the same thing could happen here eventually. I'm not saying it's gonna happen next week, next year, within the next 5 or 10 years. It could it'd be 50 years before it happens. But what I'm saying is eventually going to happen. And the reason that I'm very confident in saying that is because we could go to war with Russia, we can go to war with China, or both. If you think that there could never be a force that could try to take over the land, let me remind you that south of the border of the United States, there's a cartel. Several cartels that have tanks, they have automatic weapons, they have drones with bombs, they have radios, they have uniforms, they have their own tunnel system where they smuggle the drugs here in the United States. So they're well equipped. And if the United States Army or government or whatever were to suddenly collapse because, we have enormous amounts of death, or we have a war that suddenly broke out and the army is very busy fighting against the other superpower, whether here in the homeland or abroad, that would give those type of people the opportunity to try to get some ground here, especially if there's an EMP or some type of other event that would give them the green light to go ahead and do what they want to do. So do not think that this could never happen here in the United States, because it could actually happen. All right, so now we have all this time in the world. We still live in a system where the dollar can buy different things. We do have inflation and stuff like that, and we're starting to experience shortages, but you still have the ability to create your own prepper group, your own alliance, to where everybody networks all throughout the counties and cities that you live in, and even the state. You can work with the local government and see if there's any type of plan for them to be able to defend the county, the state, the city, if some type of Taliban group was to ever be sprung up here in the United States. So those are the things that we could actually look into. We can actually mitigate right now, since the U.S. Army is still powerful here in the United States. All right, so hopefully you don't think that this could never happen, and I haven't lost you now, but it is something that we don't want to go through in the future. And one of the things that I've actually been telling you here time after time is that if you do not plan on being here when crap hits the fan, then you're really going to have everything you need in the other places that you decide to spend the apocalypse in, because Afghanistan was another proof that will happen, that people will flee. They will leave everything behind if possible at a time of desperation for them to be able to go to a better place. Now, if you have, you can make projections and you can look into the future, I guess you can say, the best to your ability, and see where the safe haven is going to be, and then create your preps to be ready for you by the time you have to flee the United States and go to that area. If we have an economic collapse, rich people are going to flee. They already did it. When the pandemic first started, all these CEOs quit and they fled into New Zealand and they fled to other places. Rich people will leave. I really do believe the middle class and upper middle class people will also try to go somewhere else. It's going to be those of us in the lower rungs of the economic ladder where we're going to really have to stay back. We're going to have to protect our land. We're going to have to feed the people around us. We're going to have to be able to be good stewards of all the resources that we have from what all the other people left behind. All right, so let me go ahead and get into these articles that I have here for you. The first one is from msrc.fsu.edu. And the article's title is Study Reveals Top Reasons Behind Soldiers' Suicide. When researchers asked 72 soldiers at Fort Carson, Colorado, why they tried to kill themselves, out of the 33 reasons they had to choose from, all of the soldiers included one in particular: a desire to end intense emotional distress. Quote, this is really the first study that provides scientific data saying that the top reason these guys are trying to kill themselves is because they have this intense psychological suffering and pain, end quote, said Craig Bryan, a co-author of the study by the National Center for Veteran Studies at the University of Utah that will be published in the coming months. Quote, the core of the issue is that it's not the people who attempt suicide. want to harm themselves as much as they want the pain they're currently in to stop. And they don't see any other way out, end quote, Castro said. The study also found that the soldiers often listed many reasons, on average of 10 each, for suicide, illustrating the complexity of the problem, Brian said. Other common reasons include the urge to end chronic sadness, a means of escaping people, or the way to express desperation. Meanwhile, a new Pentagon analysis released Tuesday shows the suicide rates in the military were highest among people divorced or separated, with a rate of 19 per 100,000, 24% higher than troops who are single. All right, so that is the reason why I wanted to show you this, because this is the only article that I really could find that talked about soldier suicide. And again, the reason that I thought about this is because if these are the people who see these things each day and they have the training for it, they can come to a point where they want to stop the suffering. Therefore, they commit suicide, or they try to. How much will regular people try to do so in the future? And again, COVID-19 showed that people would be pushed to the edge a lot faster than we thought. And I'm not trying to be insensitive or anything like that. I just want to make sure that you look at these facts, okay? And you look at the people around you, whether it's your husband, your wife, your daughter, your son, your uncle, your aunt, your nephews, your nieces, whoever it is that you think have this type of issues in their life. I would talk with them and tell them, that you understand that they have this issue in their life, and it would be necessary. It would be actually a proper thing to do would be to talk to a therapist and try to find a way to be able to cope with these things if those services are no longer available, right? If the grid is still working, if you can still go to the clinic and get your prescription and stuff like that, then great. That is the reason why I'm a big believer in the supply chain and in the grid and everything, because it provides comfort, it provides warmth, it provides safety, and with these mental issues, okay, is a lifeline for these people who are going through this already in their lives, and remember, we live in the most powerful, rich country in the world, at least for now. And people cannot cope with everyday life now when things are readily available. How much more desperation is there going to be in the future when we see that all these things are being taken away from us? All right, that is the reason we have to take the steps right now on those family members or friends that we know, so we have the ability to cope with those things in the future if there is no longer available, okay? And make preparations if, God forbid, something bad happen, all right? The next numbers that I got is from worldpopulationreview.com, and this is what I did, all right? You know that in the previous podcast that I've done here in the past several weeks, I gave you how the poor people live and how they cope with poverty, how they eat, where they live, stuff like that, compared to rich countries in the same 6 continents, everything. And then I compare it to the shortages that everybody's experiencing. Well, now this time what I did is the same thing. I took the same 6 continents that I've shown you in the past, and I took the suicide rates on the poor countries and on the rich countries, and we're going to compare them to see what we can find. And I was actually kind of shocked, but I'm going to show them to you here. Again, these numbers that I got for the suicide rates come from worldpopulationreview.com. All right, from Asia, which is the first continent, is Afghanistan is the country, the poorest country in that continent. And very ironically, when I put this together, Afghanistan had not happened yet, but now, okay, you're gonna see you're gonna hear the rates. Now, how much more is it going to increase? How much more are the murders going to increase in Afghanistan now that the Taliban is going to take over? Okay. In Afghanistan, the total suicide rate is 4.1%. The male rate is 4.6, while the female rate is 3.6. And the population of Afghanistan is 39,835,428. The rich country in Asia is China. The total suicide rate for China is 8.1%. The male rate is 9.8, while the female rate is 6.2. Of course, their population is a lot greater with 1.444 billion people. Africa, Somalia is a poor country. Total suicide rate is 7.9%. Male rate is 12%, while female rate is 3.8%, and the total population is the total population there is 16,359,504. Nigeria is the rich country. The total suicide rate is 3.5%. Male rate is 5%. Female rate 1.9%, and the population is 211,400,708. Europe, Moldova is the poor country. Total suicide rate is 14.7%. Male rate is 26.1%. Female rate is 4.1%. All right, and the total population is 4 million people. Russia, I was pretty impressed, pretty surprised by this, and it's very unfortunate. The total suicide rate in Russia is 25.1%. The male rate is 43.6%, while the female is 9.1%, and the total population is 145,912,025. North America, with Haiti being the poorest country, the total suicide rate is 9.6%. Male rate is 11.8%, and female is 7.6%. The population is 11 million people. Canada, being the rich country, next to the United States, and of course all of that is going to be compared to the United States. The total suicide rate is 11.8%, while the male rate is 17.6%, female 6.1%, and the population is 38 million people. South America, which of course this one kind of impressed me, especially because Venezuela has gone through a very difficult time for the past 8 years. The total suicide rate is 2.1%. The male rate is 3.5%, while the female rate is 0.7%, and they have 28 million people in their country. Mexico, the suicide rate is 5.3%, male 8.5%, female 2.2%. The population is 130 million people. In the continent of Australia, Kiribati is 28.3%. There was no definite distinction between male and female, but still 28.3% is extremely high. Australia, total suicide rate is 12.5%. Male rate is 18.6%, and female 6.4%. Total population is 25 million people. All right, and here in the United States, the total suicide rate is 16.6%, with male rate 25%, female rate 7.5%, with a total population of 332 million people. Okay, so why did I just go through all of that? I know it might have been a little bit painful listening to all of that, but here's the thing, okay? To me, of course, I'm not an expert on reading statistics or anything like that, but to me, they sounded high. All those rates sounded extremely high, especially for the rich countries. Okay, you would think that the suicide rate would be higher on poor countries because they don't have the same means the rich country have. But here's the thing that kind of I guess I could kind of understand because I lived it myself. When you live through that and that becomes part of your everyday life, you do get hardened to the reality because when I did the interview with Mike Adams, he asked me how was I so mentally tough, and I have to admit that it caught me off by surprise. So I at the moment I couldn't really think of anything more profound to say, but really it's because you get used to it, so to speak. You have to become mentally tough, and you're already experiencing all of this, so you have a choice to make. Do you let yourself go, or do you become tough and you fight each and every day to make sure that your family is provided for? And I really do think that the reason that the male rate is so much higher than females is because the pressure is for the man to step up and be a provider for the family, which of course is what should happen. A lot of the times there's a lot of single women, and my mom was that way when we were growing up. My mom was single. She was taking care of 3 kids in Mexico all by herself, and the only real support that she had was my older brother. Because life was difficult then. My dad was doing his own thing, and of course all that had some water under the bridge. We're older now, and of course I'm taking care of my dad. But the point is that women have a very difficult time. Now, this is where the preparedness comes in, and I don't want it to sound cliche, but if you have your preps in place, if you prepare right now, especially being a family member, or you having a family, and by a family I mean your spouse and your children. If you already have, food stocked up, water stocked up, all the 14 categories that I teach you here. If you're taking care of those things, and let's say you complete it, you have done the best that you can to provide when crap hits the fan, and there's no food at the grocery stores, no water running in the tabs. The Taliban may be coming around, and you have the weapons necessary and the alliance necessary for you to be able to try to hold them back if they ever try to come to your area or to your house and try to take your things. They might have RPGs and stuff like that, but if you live in an area like Afghanistan, more than likely you can get your own RPGs. Now the Taliban has military equipment, but aside from that, you can take the steps necessary in order for you to be able to be successful in protecting not only your house but also your city, your county, maybe even your state. But the steps need to be taken right now in order for that to be accomplished. Now, the next article that I have for you is from The Hill, and this goes along the lines of, how will the American people react if there's ever a nuke that touches down here in the United States? Okay, so we have to look at this. Now, again, this is from The Hill, but this particular article was written by Dr. Peter Pry. He's the expert on the EMP, and I wrote about him in the book that is in the final stages of being edited. So I really looked at this article, knowing that it was him, and it piqued my interest. So here's what it says. As the 76th anniversary of the 1945 atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6th and 9th come and go, the obsolescence of U.S. nuclear capabilities increasingly appears to be eroding the foundation of deterrence. For example, when Japan's Deputy Prime Minister Taro Aso recently vowed to help the U.S. defend Taiwan to protect Japan's own strategic interest and fulfill alliance obligations, an unofficial, quote-unquote, website affiliated with China's People's Liberation Army threatened a nuclear first strike. In her July 15 blog post, Nuke and Eliminate Japan, author and human rights activist Jennifer Zhang provides a fuller account of China's nuclear threats, only partially reported by some Western media. Quote, when we liberate Taiwan, or these are quotes by the pretty much the Chinese military. When we liberate Taiwan, if Japan declares to intervene by force, even if it deploys only one soldier, one plane, and one ship, we will use nuclear bombs first. We will use nuclear bombs continuously until Japan declares unconditional surrender for the second time, end quote. Quote, we'll join forces with Russia and North Korea, three arrows, countries, shoot together to hit the Japanese mainland thoroughly and in full depth. After defeating Japan, we must take more severe measures than in World War II to partition Japan. By dividing the 4 Japanese islands into 4 independent states, China and Russia should each formulate its own peace constitution, and each of the 4 countries should be placed under the administration of China and Russia, with China and Russia stationing troops. Now the international situation has changed dramatically. In order to protect the peaceful rise of our country, it is necessary to make limited adjustments to our nuclear policy, end quote. All right, so the reason that I showed you this, or that I'm reading this to you, is because it shows, all right, for one, that China do have in mind to use nuclear weapons as soon as a war breaks out. Okay, and hopefully the United States government took that into consideration as soon as this came out. Okay, because if China will use weapons of mass destruction as soon as the first shot is fired, then we have to make sure and we have to understand that we need to have everything in place already before those bombs start flying. When are they going to fly? I have no idea. The point is that you have to be ready for it when it does happen. And if you're taking baby steps to get prepared, you need to continue doing so until the day that you can no longer do it. You're going to be better off taking baby steps than if you didn't do anything at all. And the reason I say that is because I've seen a lot of attitude in prepper forums that are pretty much people throwing their hands in the air and say, it's pretty much pointless because it's all going to end anyways. Yeah, it's all going to end, but it all depends on how much you're going to suffer before it ends, right? If you have your food, your water, and everything else in place, and you have a way to resupply yourself, and if you live in an area where very blessingly nothing happens, then you're going to be better off. All right, and you're gonna have to take these things into your own responsibility to make sure that your family are provided for, especially your alliance if you have an alliance. Okay, so do not feel like everything is hopeless and not do anything at all. Continue to prepare because you never know when the nuke is gonna fall, especially if you live in a rural area. Okay, that is the reason why we do have to take proper steps in our preparedness. Now think about this. How will people feel in those days when nukes do actually happen? Let me remind you what happened. I think it was 2018 when supposedly Hawaii's, the nuke threat people, they sent the the warning that a nuke was going their way, an ICBM. People freaked out. They didn't know what to do. They tried to run into buildings. They went into manholes. And this particular influencer, she was freaking out. She didn't know what to do. She was asking people what to do while she was live. And then she ran all throughout her house and she asked her boyfriend if she's seen the threat. All those minutes, all those seconds are going by and they're very precious. And then, suddenly you see a bright flash of light. What do? People do not know. And you have to take those steps right now. So if you live in an area that is prone to being blown up, right, you're going to have a plan to not be there if you're able to. Right? If you live in a rural area, more than likely nothing's going to happen to you if you don't live anywhere near a, military installation where they have ICBMs, so they have, strategic things that the government needs. If you live close to those, you may get blown up. So you have to look at all those things when you're making your plan and you deciding where you're going to get your bug out bag and all those things. So do not be freaking out in those days, or try not to freak out by having a plan. That's what I'm trying to get at. Okay? And here's the other thing. If we do have a war here in the United States where we actually get nuked, okay, and if the suspicion that China and Russia do have troops in the southern border in Mexico, and maybe even the northern border with Canada, okay, and then the submarines can attack us on all coast, then more than likely we would have an invasion in our hands. All right, how would people react then? How would you react then? All right, one of the things that comes to mind very, very quickly is the women and children. The next article that I have for you is exactly what is happening right now in Afghanistan. And you can say that the Taliban is an invading force, even though they've been there for very many years. The point is that since the United States was there, pushed them off into the country areas, supposedly. Now that they're reemerging and taking over pretty much the entire country, they can be seen as a invading force. And that's, savages from the 12th century, as I've heard some people say. Well, how would it be if you have a modern army, a superpower, or maybe two, or maybe three, coming against us here in the United States? All right, this is from the Daily Mail, and it says, the rape of Afghanistan. Advancing Taliban go door to door to forcibly take girls as young as 12 to be sex slaves. Wise for their fighters as they sweep across country following NATO withdrawal. Taliban fighters are going door to door and forcibly marrying girls as young as 12 and forcing them into sex slavery as they seize vast swaths of the Afghanistan from government forces. Jihadist commanders have ordered imams in areas they have captured to bring them lists of married women aged from 12 to 45 for their soldiers to marry because they view them as spoils of war to be divided up among the victors. Fighters have been going door to door to claim their prizes, even looking through the wardrobes of families to establish the ages of girls before forcing them into a life of sexual servitude. Okay, as strong and, as much as that headline pisses me off, we really have to have the plans in place for us to know what we're gonna do if that day ever comes here in the United States. I'm not offering on this one. I'm not offering any type of solution because the solutions can be very, very harsh. You can use your imagination on that. But the point is that you're gonna have to come with you, your family, your alliance, however you want to call it, and pretty much come up with the doomsday protocols. And that's what I call when there is nothing else you can do, and you have to take certain steps in order for you to ensure your safety and make sure that the girls and the women in your group are not gonna be abused. They're not gonna be used in this manner. Okay, it could be fleeing the country. It could be other things. You really have to come up with the doomsday protocols for you and your alliance in order for you to be able to tackle this exact thing that is already happening in Afghanistan. That is the reason why you can see videos of women and children desperately trying to leave the area, more than men, even though very stupidly and very ironically, men are the ones who are fleeing the area more than women. But you're seeing women and children seeing what they're trying to leave, and now that the Taliban is taking hold of the country, what they're doing, okay, is that they are going into people's houses, mainly women. They are demanding that the women cook for the Taliban, and if they don't cook the meals that they like, they beat up the women or they rape the women. If the women are poor to where they don't have enough food to feed 50 people, for one meal, then the same thing happens. So, that is the reason why a lot of the veterans, a lot of Marines, a lot of people, independent people, that have money and the resources to be able to do some type of evacuation more effectively than stupid Biden administration can do at this point. They're trying their best to try to get those people out, especially the women and children, because they understand what's happening to them, what is going to happen to them in the future. There's a reason why women from age 0 to 25 who have never been under the Taliban rule are fearing for their life. They understand that they will become sex slaves. Okay, and they have never been under the Taliban rule, so they don't really quite comprehend the reality of what they're facing in the future. Right? I understand that this particular podcast has been a little tough, but reality is tough. This is happening. That is the reason why we have to look at all of this, and we have to get the data, the current data, and apply it on our preparedness. The next headline is from Zero Hedge and says, Taliban immediately moves to confiscate firearms for civilians. Why do you think they're doing that? So that people cannot get mad because, now there's revenge killings, because the Taliban is just randomly killing people, because, they're taking women and children. They don't want people to get mad enough to where they're going to rise up and fight them back. They should. It's 38 freaking million people against, I think, like 100,000 of them, if that many. The point is that if the population was armed and they have the guts and the training to be able to fight the Taliban, then they would be able to get rid of them themselves. Now a little more difficult because of all the weapons that the United States military has left behind thanks to the Biden administration, but, I digress. The final headline that I have for you is from Zero Hedge. And this is really a warning for everyone, including us here in the United States, okay? And it says, if you live in Taiwan, it's time to worry. Taiwan needs to worry about American reliability. Unlike Afghanistan, where the United States had committed its forces for 2 decades, Taiwan has no U.S. forces and no assurance that the United States will come to their defense if attacked by China. The United States has a bad habit of walking out on its allies and friends. The list is long. It includes Vietnam and Cambodia, Iraq and Afghanistan and Iran. In all those cases, one way or another, the United States, for its own reasons, took a hike. Obama pulled U.S. troops from Iraq, opening the door to Iran, while the United States has a few thousand soldiers still in Iraq. In training and advisory capacities, they're under siege, and it's unlikely the United States will protect them. In fact, President Joe Biden has said that the United States will end combat missions in Iraq by the end of 2021, unless U.S. troops are pulled out in the middle of the night as they were in Afghanistan. They'll quite possibly have to shoot themselves out while exiting. All right, so here's the thing. All right, yes, we have been wanting the U.S. troops to get out of those areas for a very long time. Okay, but there is a proper way to do it, as I'm sure you have heard millions of times already. I'm not giving you any type of commentary on how it should have been done. Here's my thing, okay? My goal here for the ManMadeSurvival community of preppers, if my plans do come to pass, if they do happen, if God blesses me with the plans that I have, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be creating a country within a country, okay? We are not going to be a militia or anything like that. What we're going to be is prepared citizens who can step up to the occasion if anything like this happens. Imagine if we had 100 million preppers in the United States, real preppers, not the stuff that we are seeing in other places, but real preppers who are not selfish, who actually will network, who will, we will see each other as brothers and sisters for the same cause of being prepared for anything to happen. What if we had 100 million prepared citizens? Let's go even further than that, 200 million. However many children and other people who cannot, actually do it for themselves. But I'm talking about able bodies. Let's say it's 200 million. What if we have 200 million prepared citizens? They have training in with the firearms. They have training on making their own ammo. Who have training in making their own medicine and making their own, hygiene products. Who have at the very least 2 years worth of food stocked up and have plenty of water, whether it's running through the surface in the property. They have wells, they have rain catchment systems, so they even stock it up in bottled water. And we had all these 200 million people prepared. That would be a country within a country, and that's what we're doing. And I'm not talking about, that is the reason why in the mission, I specifically say we're not politically motivated. I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, or whatever it is, you're a citizen of the United States of America. And if this was ever to happen, okay, and we implode because of our currency, or we have a war where Russia and China try to invade the United States, who's going to step up to the plate? All right, if the U.S. government cannot do it like they did in Afghanistan, then it would be up to us to do it. And it would be better for us to be prepared now than try to scramble and run around later when we're scared because we have not taken the proper steps to prepare. All right, that sounds like a pipe dream or whatever. It sounds impossible, but it is possible. That is the reason why I want you to be part of all of this. That is the reason why I do this podcast. That is the reason why you need to share this information with your friends and family all throughout your social media, because we need to come together and we need to step up when tyranny comes down. All right? And the people in Iraq, the Taliban, have really opened the eyes of this community, not only under the ManMadeSurvival flag, but others who see the writing on the wall. All right, and they think they know what they would do if something like this was to happen here. How about let's not think about it, but let's train for it. Let's not try to guess. Let's look at the data and act on it. That is what we have to do here. I really hope that this podcast, as tough as it was, talking about the reality of the world, wasn't too hard for you or anything like that. I really would appreciate if you can share it throughout all your social media. And let your friends and family listen to it, so they can also get this information and they can think about these things, because the United States is not untouchable. We have seen that in the past. Whether you believe the government is working against us or not, whether you believe there is tyranny here in the United States or not, it doesn't really matter. When it comes to the individual level, everybody needs the same things. If there's shortages, everybody's going to suffer the shortages, not just certain people. All right? And I'm talking about real shortages, not just, patches of shortages everywhere. But I'm talking about events that affect the entire country all at once. Now that's when you have chaos, kind of like Afghanistan. All right. I want to leave you with that. Again, my name is Jose Pro, and remember, always ready.
The Man-Made Survival Show.